We're very, very privileged, and indeed I'm greatly honoured to have what I believe to be, certainly in Europe and perhaps I think globally, one of the foremost experts on Israeli history with us here today. Dr. Ahron, or Ronnie as he prefers to be called, Bregman, served in Zahal, the IDF, for over 6 years. Then after leaving army service, I think after the Lebanon War? Yeah. After the Lebanon War in 1982, he worked for a while in the Israeli Knesset and went on to complete degrees in Jerusalem and here in London, where he completed his doctorate in the Department of War Studies, King's College London, in 1994. Since then, he's really gone on from strength to strength. He really is a well-known figure, particularly widely consulted in the field of the Arab-Israeli conflict. He's worked as a consultant and producer on 2 major TV documentaries, The 50 Years' War, Israel and the Arabs, which was broadcast to great acclaim in 1998, and certainly was based on the title of his book. And then in 2005, the elusive piece, Israel and the Arabs, broadcast in this country with the BBC and I think the public broadcast service in the United States of America. He's the author of 5 books, and I understand next year we'll soon be publishing his 6th, which is Defeat, Israel in Lebanon, 1982 to 2012. He's here, however, to talk about his book, which has caused, dare I say, a few ripples on both sides of the Atlantic as well as in Israel, Cursed Victory, a history of Israel in the occupied territories. So please join me in giving a warm welcome to our speaker today, Dr. Ronnie Bregman.
These British are so polite. It was all positive. He, of course, failed to mention that in 1988 I left Israel after refusing to serve in the occupied territories and came to here, which was not regarded at the time as something which was, to be done. And that exposed a spy who later died in, not far from here, and etc. And I also wrote a book now which is very controversial. I'll try to keep it short because it's such a beautiful day. And I walked to here and I said, I'm not sure that it's a good idea to sit inside. And I also know how it feels toward the end of conferences. One becomes very impatient. And I also want to leave a few moments to perhaps comments, because some of the things I'll say here are controversial, and you might want to say something about it and to disagree with me, perhaps. I called the lecture Cursed Victory because, quite frankly, I couldn't find another name to it. And I thought that perhaps I'll start saying some things about the book and take it from there. It's the title of the book is Cursed Victory. I'm not trying to promote my book; they've already paid me. Okay, so in fact, it's not the original name of the book. I wanted to call it Occupation, because for us Israelis, the word occupation, kibush, is very difficult. Even for people like me, liberal left, it's a difficult word. And I thought that it's going to be a great title. But my editors said, what's the big deal? There is occupation in Iraq, occupation in Vietnam, and occupation in the French and all the rest. And then someone came up and suggested Cursed Victory. The victory being 1967, of course. You might not agree with many of the things that I say that, but there is no doubt that the book is a treasure in terms of the documents there. And many documents will never be published. Never be published. because they can't be published formally, officially by the government of Israel, etc. For example, you have the direct quotes from telephone conversations between President Clinton and world leaders, secretly recorded by Israeli agents. Unit 8200. Very interestingly, some of them just refused to serve with occupied territories. It's a big story now in Israel. I don't know if you know, BBC World Service covered the story today and brought me there as an expert on refusal, so to speak. So, for example, you have, the President of the United States speaking to world leaders, and it is secretly recorded by the Israelis and used by them. And you have a top secret document written by Shabak, the internal, MI5, what is it, Shabak, Shin Bet, saying that it would be in Israel's advantage to have Arafat dead. It's not the smoking gun that they killed him, but it's an important document. Or a letter from Margaret Albright to Prime Minister Netanyahu promising him that the United States will never put on the negotiating table any peace proposal before showing it first to Israel, giving to Israel effectively veto power. Documents from the Camp David summit, letters sent from Barak to Clinton, from Clinton to Barak to Arafat. So from this point of view, I think that it's an interesting book, because in terms of the documents, again, whatever you think about what my opinions are about the occupation. Now, a cursed victory was 1967, the 1967 war. Victory, cursed victory? Yes and no. Israel got the Sinai, for example, and it was a very important bargaining chip to say to the Egyptians, do you want peace? We'll give it back to you. Of course, it gave Israel the sense that, it is safe now. There is a buffer zone. Ironically, without the Sinai in 1967, the Israelis had a great victory over the Egyptians. With the Sinai in 1973, they had a terrible defeat at the opening stage of the war, not later. Of course, the Air Force could fly over the Sinai, how many times can you fly between Tel Aviv and Haifa? The Sinai is big and you can train. Of course, there was oil. You're not supposed to use the oil. It's against international law of occupation. But the Israelis, of course, disregarded or they disregard international law from time to time. So there were some advantages having the Sinai, and from this point of view, it was not a cursed victory. If we take the Golan Heights, in the 1960s, 1970s, it was very important to have the mountains. Standing on the mountains, on the Hermon mountain, you can look deep. You can look deep into Syria, into Lebanon. You can see that the enemy is coming. Of course, it lost its importance now because you can look into the distance from space, Google Earth or whatever. But at the time, it was important to have the Golan Heights. Of course, at the time, the backbone of the Israeli army was a tank. And tanks can't fly. They need the mountain, they need the hills. Now we have flying tanks, we have attack helicopters. So the mountains are less important now, but at the time it was very important to have it. But 1967 also brought many problems. For example, the Gaza Strip. Many people, there were 80,000 people in 1947, then 250,000 after 1948, and now close to 1 million. When Israel withdrew in 2005, there were about 1.5 million. Big problems. It's interesting to remember that Moshe Dayan, the Minister of Defense, Defense Minister of the time, warned the army not to take the Gaza Strip. He said it's a nest of snakes. We'll be stuck with it. He was right. They, of course, ignored him, but he was right. Above all, the 1967 turned the Israelis into occupiers. And they thought that they could have it differently. Moshe Dayan, he was a very clever man, he wanted to have an invisible occupation. We don't need flags, we don't need forces in the center of towns and cities. Go to the mountains, hide there. Let us create a situation whereby they will have something to lose. So we'll give them jobs. They will want to keep them. They will behave themselves. We will allow them to cross the bridges into Jordan and maybe back. They will want to keep it. They will behave themselves. But you can't have a good occupation because the methods used to maintain an occupation are the same in all occupations. If you watch the film The Battle of Algiers, that's the Israeli occupation. It's exactly the same. No difference at all. So until 1967, Israel is the injured party, the victim, if you want, of Arab aggression, and after 67, they are occupiers. And in the eyes of many people here, they are brutal occupiers. So the Sinai is back now, and there is peace between Israel and Egypt. They don't hug each other every day, but it's quiet. The Golan Heights was offered 4 times to the Syrians by Rabin, Peres after him, Netanyahu, and Ehud Barak. In the book, I published the script, the offer to the Syrians. It's very, very interesting. A very interesting moment when Barak gave Clinton a script, which I published here for the first time. It was never published before. It's a secret script because... And Clinton was supposed to sit there in front of Clinton and to read to him the script. I don't think that... Mr. President, this is Clinton reading to Assad. I invited you to this meeting because I believe we have reached a moment in truth in the effort to achieve a comprehensive peace between Israel and Syria. You know that I've been working... This is written by the Israelis, given to Clinton. You know that I've been working on this since I first came to office 7 years ago. I'm now in the last year of my presidency. I have a lot of things to do. One of them is Syria-Israel peace. It's very interesting to read it now, knowing what's happening in Syria. A peace of the brave that, when implemented, will end the Arab-Israeli conflict and provide a better future for Arabs in Israel. A peace, listen to that will help ensure a stable environment for Syria, one in which your proud legacy will be carried into future generations, written in 2000. Then he read to him Barak's offer, the border, which is very important for the Syrians. The Syrians want to sit physically on the water of the Sea of Galilee, the border. My first impression is that Barak is prepared for a full withdrawal to a commonly agreed border based on the June 4th, 1967 line. In this regard, he must have a strip of some 500 meters around the northeastern side of the lake. Of course, it was rejected by Assad. He wanted to sit on the water. 500 meters was in fact 800 meters because the idea was to use 1967 maps where the lake was bigger, and 500 meters from it is about 800 or 900 meters now that the lake is so small. So the Golan Heights was offered to them but was rejected by the Syrians. Only Sharon refused to offer it to the Syrians for all sorts of reasons. I will not cover it now. The remaining problem is the Palestinian lands. And here is my main message, which is not a new message. I think Rafi is working very hard on it, and others too. Is the two-state solution is the only and the urgent solution. And for all sort of reasons, it is urgent. If you wait for another generation or two, it will be impossible to do the separation. You know, the separation is not just a line on the map. You have to separate it on the ground. Of course, the issue of demography. I think that now we have about 10 million people between the sea and the river. 6.1, I think, Jews, and the others are not Jews. And if you wait another generation, maybe the majority will not be Muslims or Christians, etc., but it will be balanced. And then Israel will have two options, in fact. One, to offer them to participate in elections, in which case you might have a Palestinian prime minister. Or to say, no, we are not going to let you vote, in which case we are South Africa. There are also changes, and this is why it is urgent to have a two-state solution. There are changes in Israeli society, especially in the army. In the infantry units, you can see more and more settlers. Ofer Winter, the commander of the Givati Brigade, or maybe it's the Golani Brigade, I can't remember now, is a settler. Givati. He's a settler, a fantastic soldier, don't misunderstand me. They are as good as the people from the kibbutzim in the 1960s, 70s. But there is a problem here. Because if in the future you will want to impose a two-state solution, the army will have to be sent into the settlements to drag them out. You had to do it in Yamit in 1982 in April. Ariel Sharon, they sent the army into Yamit and they pulled out the settlers. Many of them were secular, put them in big cages and sent them back to Israel and razed the settlements to the ground. But what will happen in the future if you will have to send infantry units into the settlements? That Ofer Winter will have to drag out his father or mother or sister or children out of the settlement? Just an impossible situation. There will be a conflict between their loyalty to what they believe and their loyalty to the system. It's also urgent and sensitive because of the impact of the conflict on the Arabs living in Israel. There are, 1.2 million people. It's a very dangerous situation. If you have an intifada of so many people and they are not evenly distributed around Israel, over Israel, they are focused, as you know, in Wadi Ara and in other areas. If you have an internal Israeli intifada in Israel proper, you have a problem. You will not be able to travel from Tel Aviv to Haifa. And if one day I write the history of the conflict between Israelis and Palestinians living in Israel, I'll start in October 2000, when the Israeli police opened fire and killed 10 Arabs, Israeli Arabs. Sorry, second? 13. It was a...
One Jew.
Yeah.
So 12.
Yeah. Yeah. It was an important moment. So this issue is sensitive. And the two-state solution is urgent. And Israel will not move. Israel will not move because those of you who are from Israel, you are from Israel, you were my teacher, and David and Rafi and so many other people, you know how the Israeli... Say again?
Don't surrender us.
You know how the Israeli mind ticks. I know that you know that I know too. That when it is quiet, the Israelis say it's quiet. There is no reason to change anything. And when there are revolutions, intifadas, they say, no, it's too noisy now. We shouldn't work, we shouldn't do anything under pressure. There are two things which will move the Israelis. And in identifying these two things, which with I agree, personally, I am not important. I'm always describing to you, I believe, a situation which is underway already. One thing that will move the Israelis and push them in the direction which is urgent to implement a two-state solution is a massive Palestinian intifada against the occupation. The Palestinians, if they don't move, they will not get a state. I'm talking about a non-violent Palestinian intifada. No rockets, no suicide bombers, but an uprising against the Israeli occupation. They can't get it on a silver platter. They can't get it by going to cocktail parties. They have to go and get it. Israel did it in 1948. Israel lost 1% of the population. I'm called after my great-great-uncle who was killed in 1948 at the age of 22. And the Israeli government, any government, will not move unless it is under pressure, not because they are bad people. They are not bad. Because it is against human nature to give up so much and get nothing in return. The Palestinians have nothing to offer except of words. And the Israelis, like any nation, only move when they are under pressure. In 2005, they withdrew from Gaza, among other reasons, because of the pressure on them in Gaza. After the 1973 war, they agreed to withdraw from the Sinai because they got a bloody nose in 1973. In 1957, they withdrew from the Sinai because America said get out, and Russians. I can give you so many examples to show that Israel only moves when under pressure. The English too will move when they are under pressure. I couldn't care less about it now. That's the nature of things. And therefore, if you want to move the Israelis in the direction which I believe is urgent, there must be a Palestinian uprising. In my view, it has already started. It's like a kettle with boiling water inside. The lid is on it, and the Israeli army is sitting on it. The Israelis will either slip off it because of the pressure of the boiling water, or there will be a big explosion. It's inevitable. The second condition, which I believe is essential, in order to move the Israelis, and you might ask, what about the Palestinians? I can say about the Palestinians some things which I'll do in a minute. But I think that it should be all unilateral. The other thing which should move the Israelis is massive international pressure on them. They will not move in the direction which I believe is urgent. They will not move in the direction of a two-state solution without a massive international pressure on them. It will be either carrots or sticks. I believe the carrots. I prefer the carrots. I believe that the Israelis move better when you offer them carrots. The best example is what happened after the 1973 war. And some of you probably know the history. In 1974, 75, the Americans asked the Israelis to withdraw in the Sinai Desert, 35 kilometers. The Israelis were reluctant at the beginning. The Americans said, we'll pay you $3 billion a year forever. The Congress, of course, will approve it. How do you think, and why do you think that Israel gets so much money every year, regardless of the financial situation in the United States? The Americans said to the Israelis, we'll protect you from the Russians. It was the Cold War. Just withdraw a little bit. We will not speak to the PLO. Before the PLO renounce or denounce, I can't remember now, terrorism, which they will do in 1988. We provide airplanes to the Egyptians and to the Saudis. Your airplanes will fly higher and faster. 20 years technological gap. We will show you our peace plans before showing it to the Arabs. Shimon Peres, who was Minister of Defense at the time, said, they offered us so much we couldn't refuse. And Israel withdrew. Diplomatic bribe, you could call it, I couldn't care less. The principle of withdrawal was established by offering the Israelis carrots. And if it doesn't work, I believe that boycotts should be imposed on products and services coming from the occupied territories, not on Israel directly. It will affect Israel, of course, because of the links. It worked with South Africa. There is no reason why it will not work with Israel, and I know that you don't like the comparison. It is a very effective tool. Now, to where all of this should lead us? Obviously, to the two-state solution. Well, of course, I'm aware and recognize that there's a massive earthquake in the Middle East now. And it does have an impact and effect on the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. If the Islamic State gets closer to Jordan and through Jordan to the Jordan Valley, you know, the Israelis want to have the Jordan Valley as a buffer zone. It makes sense. But this is supposed to be about 30-40% of the future Palestinian state. And therefore, I think that the two-state solution should be implemented in two phases. In the first phase, all the isolated settlements will be evacuated, and the army, the military, will continue to patrol the West Bank. The door will be open for Palestinians to negotiate. And when, at the end of the negotiations, they'll be ready to spell out the 6 magic words, which is end of conflict, no more claims, the Israelis will withdraw from the occupied territories, and there will be a Palestinian state which will be composed of 2 parts, the West Bank and the Gaza Strip. The 2 parts will be connected, maybe with a bridge, but they are very good doing tunnels now, so maybe, through a tunnel. Thank you very much.